Is there a go live button? Okay, I'm afraid. Nope. Nope. It says excellent connection. Great. Public
It
on
was,
automation
yeah, it
on
was
the same
showing. It's
name. No
showing on
problem.
this end that you were streaming a minute ago, so I don't know what happened, but it registered something at least briefly.
Hmm. Oh, here we go. Okay. Hello, hello. All right. So here we go. Hello, my name is Draxter Dupre, and you probably know this because you're watching this on my channel, I suppose. And episode one is finally out, and it's about Caledonia Sky Tower. A lot of people ask me, what is this episode about during the months of production? And I said, I don't know. It's very hard to find out. Um, I admit that I am a little, my mother was a teacher. I have this sort of genetic thing where sometimes I admit it's maybe a little bit, snarky, or I don't know, where I'm kind of triggered by things that are very obvious, with like a little just research or connecting two dots. Anyway, I apologize. But I'm here at Shawnee Library with Caledonia Sky Tower, who's the subject, the protagonist of this first video, and we're here with a bunch of folks. And hello, Caledonia.
Hello, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Yeah, so you had the Drax Files World Maker series, which I was a big fan of,
Yeah.
and then when you were contracted with the lab, you were making the Made in SL series.
Yeah.
How much thought and consideration did you give when you knew you wanted to launch this new series and you were considering what to call it? And
Yeah.
what led you to marry those two series names together? I mean, it may seem like an obvious
Yeah.
choice, but it's not necessarily that obvious a choice. So tell us a little bit
Right.
about what was on your mind.
That's an excellent question. The short answer, nothing is ever on my mind. And the second answer is, why did people name who were in charge of naming Cherry Coke to stay with the theme? I don't know. This is actually a good question, and in essence, the series is the same, or has the same impetus or the same sort of agenda, which is to document and celebrate individuals and communities in the Second Life context, people who are using the blank page and fill it
Hmm.
with color. Um, and it was kind of a no-brainer once I thought about just combining this, because when we started Made in SL, it's also just, it sounds really cool. And the Drax Files, I always liked that. It was also kind of a spur of the moment thing, obviously the X Files and
Well,
kind of
yeah, I think
cheap
it seems like
joke,
it
but
seems like there were two different directions you could have gone with this. You could have gone with a I'm not working for the lab anymore
hmm
and I'm doing my own thing and this is a new series and make it seem something distinct. Or you can do what you did, which was to say, I'm still doing the work, I'm still committed to the work that I've been
mm,
doing, which is telling the stories of the people and the organizations who bring depth and diversity to Second Life. Um, and so I'm still doing it. I'm just, this is just a new chapter. And
hmm
so
yeah,
I
that's
found that
exactly,
intriguing.
yeah, and that's really the vibe that you're expressing now. Is if people get that from the quote unquote branding, a word I hate almost as much as I hate the word content, then I'm very happy. And let it be known that although I love Frank Zappa, I have to acknowledge my output is more like the Rolling Stones. I've been writing the same song for 20 years. Where's the sound effect guy? But I also want to briefly, and then I want to, and we can have this as a conversation, but I really don't want to occupy the air, because there's a lot of stuff that we talked about, and I'm not sure if people generally know that these short, I call them mini documentaries, or you can call it human interest reportage, whatever, are based on longer conversations, and they're not just sort of like, here's a bunch of questions that I'm going to email you and you send them back, because I've gotten very positive feedback and people refer to, and I don't hold it against them. I mean, if people don't work in media, they're not necessarily familiar with all the formats, but they say, "Oh, I really love this interview." And then sometimes I get like, you know what? That's not an interview. It's based on an interview and several conversations, but it's not an interview. An interview is something different. So I'm also, again, this is sort of triggering me with my mom being a teacher, or having been a teacher, where I need to educate people. Let me be a stickler. But what I wanted to say in closing is that my Linden Lab contract, and I said it many times, but I'm going to say it again. The relationship was a wonderful relationship with enormous freedom, because I also know that there is a little bit of a perception that somehow I got marching orders from lab people who and what to cover and how to cover. And that is not the case. It was never the case, with two or three exceptions that had to do with partnerships that Linden Lab made with other entities. For example, Film Threat, where Brett from Linden Lab suggested, "Hey, we just have a deal with Film Threat, where they have a place and they're going to show films and they're going to do film critique." Film Threat is a well-known website, independent film stuff. And would you like to do something in your series, right? Now, the sentence "would you like to do something in your series" was not uttered in a Dr. No type sense, right? Like, "Would you like to do this, Mr. Bond? Because if you don't, you're dead." Um, anyway, long story short, the freedom that I had with Linden Lab in terms of covering things, what to cover, how to cover it, was there was an enormous freedom. There was never a list or a demand to cover anything. The big difference now, and then I'll shut up and ask you a question, is that the the freedom to have more time. And time is very important if you want to create something that is not just a quick consumable piece of content, a word that I hate. Did I mention that? I don't want to create little consumable pieces of content where people flick through and then go on to the next. I want to create something that has a lasting impact and has historical value over time, where people go back to it, hopefully, and even if they don't, doesn't matter, but they could. Something that has a deeper meaning than just something that entertains you briefly and kills some of your time in your lunch break. All right, that's it. Now, my question to you, Caledonia, and anybody here in the audience also can ask questions and comment. Do you think my content, my work? Actually, let me ask Judy Lynn. No, you can chat. But anyway, is it is it too dark? Is my stuff too dark? Caledonia was like, well,
Hmm.
there are
No.
things, when I look at my sky in the morning, it's certainly bright.
Well, I mean, no, this particular one, right? Okay, so yeah, I have to agree with with Judy Lynn. I don't think so. Um, I we talked for over 90 minutes when we first did the interview, which was,
But we
gosh,
had two follow-ups.
almost
I actually timed that.
almost a year ago.
We had 3 hours of total conversations.
Yeah, and that
In
was like over a year ago,
Yep,
almost a year ago, coming up, and you pulled 12 minutes out of that. I write, so I kind of get this.
yep.
it's like it's funny. I mean, 3 hours is a huge amount of time to figure out and try and sum up someone who someone is and what they do. But you managed to distill it down to 12 minutes. Are there things that we talked about that didn't make it in? No, but if you were to have picked three or four good beats, you sure did, and it really of necessity had to start with the story about the pandemic and my mom dying. So was it a dark start? Yeah, but it kind of spreads out from there. It's such a great story about
Oh,
how.
interesting. How I'm sorry to interrupt, but you meant dark. I meant in purely visual terms, in terms of color palette. But that's interesting, and we're going to continue talking about that. But let me just jump in here real quick. I meant dark in the terms of color palette because when I look at my stuff, and you probably can relate, and we can talk about that too, how painful it is to look at your own stuff or read your own stuff. I actually have,
Mm,
I suffer, I mean, it makes me so anxious. And but the greatest joy is to actually look back at something maybe a year later and then kind of feel like, hey, it's really not that bad. And I'm
yeah,
sure people can relate who create things because when you look at the finished thing, you look at you feel you relive the pain that it took to get there.
I don't think there was anything because we actually covered a lot of different stuff in 12 minutes and a lot of different locations. And I don't think I just looked because on my other computer the section of the footage you took last December in Dickens was up. Um, I don't think there was anything where the tone was inappropriate for where we were.
Yeah,
You know,
thank you,
you know,
Caledonia. Oh my God. See,
you know
this goes down like
when when
do
we were,
mhm,
I like stage shows. When we were in the sandbox, what's your number one thing in a sandbox is you want to be able to see what you're doing,
mhm.
and there we are in a fairly general open eep. The eep that you chose, or the variation that you did on the eep we chose for Bradbury, was right in line. Same thing for Dickens. There's we actually have a lot of debate among the Dickens team about what the eep is, because there's some people who want
Mm,
to go really gritty and yellow and brown and very documentary Victorian, and I keep going, why would I want to spend this much time on two regions in this, and I can go see it in 5 or 10 other regions in Second Life? Let's do something that's a little different, because we're not doing documentary work, we're evoking the feeling of a novel. So so there's
right.
always a little bit of tug
And you know,
in there,
yeah,
back and forth, and one hopes that in that tug we come up with something appropriate. Appropriate is always my goal,
appropriate.
honestly.
Appropriate.
Appropriate.
Caledonia, this means a lot really coming from you because the one thing that I noticed is, and because these are some discussions I had with people who would say that, and then sometimes I look at stuff and I get really kind of self-conscious and very insecure about some choices, and then I don't remember why did I make these choices when I made them, and then later I look at it and go like, you know what, that really actually works for the story. And now I think sort of in analyzing some of the stuff, I realize that intuitively, unconsciously, what I may be doing, again, if you have a degree in psychotherapy, please confirm or deny. But I think my perception of what SL is, right? I mean, is that it's totally not a game. And that's why I don't generally like when people present Second Life. And this is not, I'm not trashing anyone. It's just that I don't like when Second Life is being presented, especially in a promotional context, as sort of super hyper high resolution, very very digital, um, high res game type features. There are people who work for the Linden Lab who do promotional stuff, videos. They're extremely talented. They're wonderful people. I know them personally. Their choices, which is probably choices that have been discussed by marketing for very good reasons, right? Because they have a different goal than I have. They need to get people in, and they need to attract people who are attracted to a certain look. I don't like that look. I also don't like the look of many, modern mainstream big Hollywood movies. And and I think that when sometimes I look at my stuff when it just came out and I go like, "Oh my God, that's kind of dark. Isn't that like a little depressing?" And then I look at some other stuff that is super bright and poppy and action. I go like, "Wow, why am I not like this?" And then I wake up in the morning and I go like, "You know what? That's not me. I am not that person. I can present it only the way I see it, right?"
Well, and you have and I learned more about this by working with you. You have a really definite style of storytelling, and I don't think that's a subject for debate. You know what I mean? I think you at this point between the two series and all the work that you've done, you have a style of storytelling that works and is you. And I think you have to trust your gut.
Yeah.
It's funny. I can go back as a designer when I'm designing a set. I can go back and explain practically any decision I made. But if I lead you to believe that I sit and think those out after 35 years, I'd be leading you down the garden path. I
Yeah.
don't. I
Yep.
make I make a lot of those decisions instinctually. Shandon, who you met, who is a storyteller here, has really great instincts, but he doesn't have the same background as I do, and he's always amazed when he goes, "Oh, I don't know, I just threw this out," and I then tell him why it works, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't realize I did something right. I didn't realize I
Yeah.
did something that was logical." It's, yeah, you did. You have really good instincts. Let me tell you why this works. So I think and there's so many ways that you could depict Second Life, and that Second Life is depicted. And I think at some point, owning the series, you just have to trust your gut. I think in
Yeah.
that intro is a beautiful example of how you go from something again appropriately dark to then we went to that location at Callus Galadon. That's where the
Yeah,
second scene takes
exactly. And
place,
when I
which
edited,
is
I
really
realized
different.
exactly. And when I edited this, and I realized, you know what, I had this again, and as you know, and I'm all with Werner Herzog about storyboards, how for cowards, that type thing. But the you in this house. I mean, I'm definitely proud of that in the sense that it visually enhances the story such that your frame of mind in this dark house alone and Second
Hmm.
Life then is that colorful thing. But one more point about this, and then I don't want to talk about me and my insecurities anymore. That's a different story. It's called the wine files, the me files with Dragster.
Everybody who knows Drax for any period of time knows that last is a sliding scale.
Correct. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I'll be done now. 2 hours later. No, but here in the audience, I just see Judy Lynn and Angelica and others. And please forgive me if I'm not mentioning your name. Um, who are visual artists, and I don't come. I mean, the reality is I come from music and radio, and so one thing that I'm very confident about is pacing. But one
Hmm.
thing that I'm not, and I am self-conscious when I am in the presence of people who come from the visual medium. And so I know psychology, I can totally self-analyze where my insecurities come from, and I just got to overcome them, and now I'm going to shut up. So Caledonia, what is the one thing that you wanted to have covered from your creative life in this story that was not covered? Is there
Gosh,
anything?
I'm trying to think of some of the things that we talked about while we were filming that we didn't make it in. We talked about
Well, I
barrier
can tell
keeping.
you one thing that I was totally that was in my rough cut for the longest time because it was one